Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our study, and we're getting back into the text of Song of Solomon today, picking up in chapter 5 into the second half of the book. If you'd like our free PDF, you can download it at tobelikechrist.com, and as always, our first two sections remain pretty much the same. Solomon is our author, and our key characters are the young woman, the young man, Solomon, and the daughters of Jerusalem, all of which will be relevant in chapter 5. We do have two somewhat unusual words, at least in the modern day, that we want to define. The first one is the term ruddy. It appears in verse 10, a person with a red or rosy color in their face, and this was an indication of health. Who else was described as ruddy in the Bible? David was, Solomon's father. Must have been some good genetics. It was a way of describing somebody who was handsome, I think, in a lot of ways. And it must have been some good genetics in that family, because David's described as really good looking, Solomon here by his bride, and of course, Absalom, who was one of the best looking guys ever, apparently came from David's family. So good genetics here. Okay, then we have the term alabaster. You might know this one. It's in verse 15, a soft white stone used in stone carving. Okay, so let's get into our text and break it down. I've got three sections today. The first one is just one verse. The locked garden continued. And I'll tell you, I have no idea why this verse is in this chapter. It absolutely seems like it fits in the last chapter because it's the conclusion to what started in the last chapter. So I'm like utterly baffled. Maybe there's a reason that it's here, but it seems like it belongs in chapter 4. The locked garden continued. So verse 1 concludes Solomon's analogy that he began in chapter 4. He enjoyed the pleasures of the garden on his wedding night. You remember talking about the locked garden and the beauty of the virginity of his bride. So he enjoys the pleasures of the wedding night, and he describes this figuratively as gathering spices, eating honeycomb, and drinking wine with milk. Now in section 2, we switch gears, verses 2 through 8, the young woman's dream. The young woman here appears to describe a dream that she had, very similar to the one that she had back in chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. Similar in some ways, but also different in some ways. And I should mention that it's not exactly clear whether this is chronological, whether this is post-wedding, or this is describing an event before the wedding. So as I mentioned, Song of Solomon doesn't always necessarily have to be in chronological order because it is poetic. So just keep that in mind. She was sleeping when she heard somebody knocking at the door, and it was her beloved asking to be let in. Now, she wasn't ready to receive guests, and so she was delayed. She wasn't dressed properly. Her feet had already been washed to go to bed. So she prepares eagerly with anticipation of opening the door, and she's excited about it. And when she finally gets to the door, the young man is gone. He vanishes. And so she's thrown into this somewhat unrealistic, but no less distressing dilemma, as dreams often do to us. What she does when she realizes that he's vanished from out in front of her door is she runs out into the street searching for her lover, kind of like the first dream. But he's nowhere to be found this time. And things go from bad to worse when the watchmen of the city beat her and take her veil. Now, would they have done this in reality? I don't think so, but in a dream, perhaps. The dream seems to be just an expression of her love sickness, how devastating it is to have this anticipation that he's at the door, and then she opens the door and he's not there anymore. And perhaps you've had a dream about someone you love that was kind of similar to this. There's the anticipation of embracing her lover only for the dream to sweep him away and vanish him into thin air. So she concludes this section with a plea to these daughters of Jerusalem, saying this, quote, I adjure you, if you find my beloved, that you will tell him I am sick with love. So there's a natural flow from section 2 to section 3, verses 9 through 16. The young woman describes her beloved. In response to her plea to help her find her beloved, the daughters of Jerusalem ask the young woman what makes her lover special. Why is he better than any other man? And in response, the young woman describes the handsomeness, the attractiveness of this young man who has captured her heart. She says that he's radiant and ruddy. There's our word that we defined. His head is carved gold with black wavy locks of hair. His eyes like doves and his cheeks like piles of sweet-smelling herbs. His lips drip liquid myrrh. His arms are rods of gold, and his body like polished ivory set with sapphires. His legs are alabaster columns on bases of gold, his appearance like the strong cedars of Lebanon, and he is altogether desirable. It's funny. My wife just described me like this the other day. I just read it here. It's so similar. Especially the parts about the wavy locks of black hair. That I remember distinctly. Okay, so that is chapter 5. Let's talk about our application for today as we finish up. You'll notice that both the man and the woman devote sections to describing the physical attractiveness of their lovers. And I don't think that this should be overlooked. While physical attraction isn't everything, certainly, it's also not nothing. Physical attraction is natural, and we should want to be desirable to our spouse. And this should be something that we think about in marriage, to be attractive to our spouse, not just, when we're getting married. A lot of people take care of themselves before they get married, but not after they get married. But this is how to sustain that physical attraction and to be satisfied, intimately satisfied with your spouse over the long term. This is part of it. It's not all, but it's part of it. And we can all take steps to improve our attractiveness. Dressing better, eating better, getting a haircut when we need one, going to the gym, etc. And of course, all of us with the bodies that we've been given, some of us have sicknesses, some of us have health elements that are involved in that. It's going to look different for everybody, but you have to be honest with yourself about what you can do and what you can't do. And we should do what we can do to respect, to honor our spouse and ourselves, the body that God has given us. I don't know any man who wouldn't want to be described as the young woman describes her beloved at the end of chapter 6, right? Men, And I don't know any woman who wouldn't love to have her husband look like that. You may not have David and Solomon and Absalom's genetics, but you can do a lot, right? And I don't know any woman who wouldn't want to be described the way that Solomon describes his bride in chapter 4. And I don't know any man who wouldn't love for his wife to look like that. So let's do what we can with the bodies that God has given us to make them as attractive as possible, to respect our spouse and to honor our marriage, and to keep the flames of intimacy and desire alive for the benefit, the long-term benefits of all of our marriages. That is Song of Solomon chapter 5, and Lord willing, we'll be back tomorrow to take on chapter 6.